So with 5 sleeps to go, I have finished my pre-course reading for session number 1. It's called When We Were Young, Communicating Without Words. I'm guessing that the day is going to be focused around babies and psychology when you're a baby and the impact of parents on their baby. We had 3 pre-course texts that we had to read. The first one was called Transitional Objects and Transitional Phenomena, which when we are born, we bond with our mothers. We do that predominantly by breastfeeding. Transitional object is the first thing that begins to replace that physical action. So essentially something that soothes us. Fist sucking, finger sucking, thumb sucking, putting things in our mouth that replicates the sensation of breastfeeding. From that, we learn to associate emotional feelings to a particular object. So some of us have like little pieces of blanket, and some of us would have like a particular toy, and that is the whole meaning behind transitional phenomena. In a healthy child development, the child would go from breast to object to eventually recognizing that the object doesn't actually give them much of what they need anymore, and then they would go on to mature and have healthy lives. In an unhealthy psychological development of a child, they would not go through that phase. They would become very attached to the object or behaviour. It would give them something. As they grow, they would still seek comfort in that thing, predominantly because the theory suggests that the mother isn't giving them what they need, or relationships outside of the mother aren't giving them what they need. And then they go on to have things like oral fixations and potentially dysfunctional relationships with things versus people. As a psychoanalyst, it would be our job to identify with the patient what their history of bonding with their mother, their relationship with their mother, what their behaviour was in terms of fist sucking, finger sucking, what object they had, whether or not they left it behind in life, whether or not they kept it for a long period of time, what other oral fixations they have had throughout their life, what relationship they have with objects or things that like soothe them, pacifiers, that type of thing. Piece it all together and look at links from the here and now back to the past, and sort of go through and break down that whole, when I say break down, as in explore it with the client, and make analysis based on that individual's particular experience in that particular scenario. The second text I read was called Ghosts in the Nursery. This was an interesting concept that I hadn't really ever given much thought to previously. Essentially pointing out that trauma in a mother's unconscious can play through in the child's unconscious when it is born. For example, if you had a mother who had a very distressing childhood themselves, one of the examples in the book was that this particular mother was often put outside if deemed to be naughty by her parents when growing up. Unconsciously, that is then repressed. You don't want to think about it. It's boxed away somewhere in your head. When you then have a child, that is unconsciously being played through the parent to the child. The child then acts cut off from the mother, cut off from other people, because the child is re-experiencing the unconscious repressed stuff of the mother. The therapist would work to explore the pattern going on between the mother and the child, where it came from, what got repressed, what got closed off, what is actually being played out through the child, what that links back to in the mother, gets the mother to talk it all through, and then hopefully eradicates that unspoken, unsaid tension that is playing out between the parent and the child. The final text that I read was called Beginnings, and it was basically asking the question, where does psychological development begin? Is it in the uterus? Is it at birth? Or is it within the first few months of the child being born? I found this a very interesting question. Personally speaking, I believe it's in the uterus. For example, one family might play music to the mother's bump. One family might read stories to their bump. One family might make sure their house is kept as peaceful and as okay as possible, whereas another family might have a very chaotic house. It might be very loud, it might be very noisy, it might be very the mum might be stressed all the time, she might have other stuff going on. And so if you compare the differences in the mother's experience of pregnancy versus then the difference in children that are then born to different pregnancies, I think it plays a part on the new child. So I think psychological development begins right from the moment you are conceived. Well, not the very moment you are conceived, but the point at which you start to hear sound, the point at which you're aware of your surroundings. Let's say you have a twin in there, you're sharing a space right from day dot. So I think different things can influence you right from the very beginning. Essentially, I've put together this video for two reasons. Firstly, as a little bit of revision for me to help me check in with what I have learnt pre the course and see how much I remembered. Secondly, to give you a little bit of a insight into what I'm going to be learning, studying, discussing with my training group on Saturday. So this just gives you a little taster of what my first lesson is going to be all about.